Welcome to the Rob Call Bottom Up Show, sponsored by OpEdNews.com, available on Pacifica Radio Network, Progressive Radio Network, on iTunes, on Stitcher, at OpEdNews.com/podcasts, and on YouTube. My guest for this show is Steve Kaplan. He's the author of The Comic Hero's Journey, The Hidden Tools of Comedy, and The Serious Business of Being Funny. Artists he's taught, directed, or produced have won Oscars, Emmys, Golden Globes, and WGAS awards. Did I get that right? WGAS?
Yeah, WGA, Writers of America.
Okay. He's co-founder of Manhattan Punchline Theater and creator of the HBO New Writers Project. His website is kaplancomedy.com, KAPLANCOMEDY.com. Welcome to the show.
I'm happy to be here.
And, you know, I was saying to you, I've had many authors from your publisher, Michael Weiss Publications, on the show. And it's always fun and informative because you basically write books telling screenwriters how to cover some aspect of creating stories.
Right. And it's not just screenwriters. It's all filmmakers. There's books on editing, books on filmmaking, books on distribution. So It's all about the business of the industry of filmmaking.
That's right. I think the last one I had on was on how to do crowdfunding for making movies. So yeah,
exactly.
I think it was John Dragonis. So, but you've done this book, the Comic Hero's Journey. And I love the hero's journey. The hero's journey, before it was called the hero's journey, was called the monomyth, and it was described at least 100 years ago. And then Joseph Campbell made it very popular by writing the book Hero with a Thousand Faces. And then Chris Vogler made it very popular for writers by writing the writer's journey. And here you've got the Comic Hero's Journey.
Well, Chris Vogler is a friend of mine. So when I started working on this book, I told him. Well, first I asked him if he minded, and then I told him, even if you do mind, I'm still going to write it. And it's kind of a loving homage to Joseph Campbell and to you, but I'm taking it from the point of view of what happens differently in a comedy than, say, something like Star Wars, because Star Wars was written by George Lucas using Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey.
And Lucas literally hung out with Joseph Campbell. There are pictures of them together. I mean, it was an intimate relationship there. But I want to start off by asking you, what is the function and the role of comedy? You've had a lifetime to think about it, really.
Yeah. Well, for me, I've spent a lot of years trying to defend the importance and seriousness of comedy. People, I don't know, maybe some attitudes have changed, but it used to be that, people thought, drama, that was serious, important work. If you're going to do something about war, about racism, Holocaust, you're going to have to do something very serious. And comedy was the silly stuff. Comedy was the unimportant stuff. But for me, looking at it very analytically, I believe that comedy is the art of telling the truth. And specifically, comedy is the art of telling the truth about people. Because if you look at a drama, now I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with drama. I love dramas. But if you look at a dramas tell a beautiful lie. It's a wonderful lie. They tell stories of heroism and stories of daring do. And drama helps you dream about what you could be. Would I were that strong and that capable that I could be James Bond or Luke Skywalker, or would that I were so talented and expressive that I could be a great painter like Leonardo da Vinci or Kirk Douglas in Lust for Life. So drama tells a beautiful lie, but But comedy tells the truth about people. And when people in my workshops ask me, well, that's not true. What about Hamlet? What I say, because Hamlet's written by Shakespeare, the greatest dramatist in the world, and Hamlet's his greatest play. So what I say to people is, I ask them if they've ever seen a production of Hamlet. And they'll say yes. And I say, have you ever seen a production of Hamlet in which Hamlet farts? And they'll say, no, of course not. And I'll say, but people do fart, right? People, I mean, you eat a Mexican dinner, you eat some bean, you're going to pass wind. People do fart. People, it happens. What would happen in a production of Hamlet if Hamlet farted? To be or not to, and they say people would laugh. And I say, yes, exactly right. If you show what happens in life, people laugh. Drama takes out all those parts of life that are silly or ridiculous or absurd. But if you look at a comedy, any great comedy has pain and loss in it as well. So comedy tells the whole truth about people, whereas drama tells a slightly edited version of life in which people act nobly and heroically, or even if they act basely, it's always in appropriate levels. They always act appropriately. When you have people acting inappropriately, you're doing a comedy. And what I tell people is that if you look at life is a bunch of people acting wildly inappropriately, only we don't want people to know it. I'll say, think about yourself on a first date. What do? Somebody knocks on the door, do you open the door and say, let me tell you everything about me? No, you try to put your best face forward, your best foot forward. You try to impress somebody. And then if they get to know you after 3 or 4 or 5 dates and they get to like you, then maybe you let them know a little bit about yourself, how crazy you are, the fact that you alphabetize all your books by author and by genre. I mean, that's nuts. So in comedy, we tell strangers the worst things about ourselves or the truth about ourselves, and that creates laughter. So for me, comedy is the art of being okay that it's human. Being human is tough. We grow up. We have problems. We have victories and defeats, and then we die. And so you can either sit home and weep, or it's like what Sholem Aleichem said. Sholem Aleichem, a great Yiddish writer of the 19th century, said, just for spite, I'm gonna laugh. Just to spite all the terrible people and terrible things in the world, there will be comedy. And that's my belief. My belief is that comedy is life-affirming, life-giving, and it's about the will of people to not only survive, but to thrive in the face of almost unbelievable and inescapable problems.
You also talk about hope, comedy and hope.
Right. Comedy is the art of hope. The paradigm of comedy is an ordinary guy struggling against insurmountable odds without many of the required skills and tools with which to win, yet never giving up hope. If you have all those elements in place, you have a comic moment or a comic scene. So in a drama or even in a comedy, when your character realizes that they're in a hopeless situation, you create a dramatic moment. But when your character, even though we in the audience can see it's hopeless, if your character is still striving mightily, stupidly, to achieve a goal, then we can laugh.
Now, what's the difference between like entertainment comedy, like stand-up comedy, and a movie, a comedic movie or story?
I think there's actually more. I mean, one difference between stand-up comedy and a movie is stand-up comedy is a character base, a persona, expressing their truth and their observations, minus a narrative. In a sketch, you have characters in a unusual or odd situation, or odd characters in a usual situation that can go on for 3 to 5 minutes. In a sitcom, you have characters in a situation that continues for about 22 minutes, and they have different iterations of that same situation. And in a movie, you have characters in either odd characters in a normal situation or normal characters in an odd situation. And the difference in a movie is that it's powered by theme. All long-form comedy, all long-form fiction is thematic. Sitcom.
What does that mean, thematic?
It's, if somebody says, "What is this movie about?" They're asking one of two questions. They're asking, what's the situation of the movie, or what's the meaning of the movie? So theme is the meaning. So, and sitcoms have meanings too, but you don't have resolution. So for the sitcom of Friends, you would think, well, Friends is about 6 attractive young people who say funny things, and they live in the best apartments that don't ever exist in New York City. But thematically, Friends is about how do you navigate the distance between childhood and adulthood. And that's every episode of Friends, is these six characters desperately trying to figure out how you traverse the unknown terrain between being children and being adults. And the minute that they all became adults, the series was over. In a movie puts a character in an either impossible or improbable situation. This is in a comic movie, like Big. A kid wishes he were bigger. He wakes up the next day, he's 30 years old. That's impossible. That could never happen. But if it did happen, it begs the question, what would happen next? But the theme of Big is, what's the nexus, the connection between adulthood and childhood? And the theme, along with character, creates the development of the movie. In the middle of the movie of Big, Tom Hanks meets the owner of a toy company. And the reason the owner of the toy company is there is because it's thematic. Why doesn't he meet the owner of a gas station? Why doesn't he meet a guy who works in a bank? Because those things, a gas station and a bank, have nothing to do with the connection between childhood and adulthood. Whereas a toy company is the perfect vehicle to explore what it means to be a child in an adult's world. Because a toy company is a group of adults making products for children. Groundhog Day, for instance, the theme of Groundhog Day is, how can you be a mensch in the world? And, mensch is, as we know, a Yiddish word that means mensch. It means a good person, a nice man. And so comedy is the difference between stand-up and feature films, is that a stand-up is just basically expressing a character's point of view. And the character is either an idiot, like Howie Mandel, who says something funny, the audience laughs, and he goes, what, as though he doesn't know what he just said. Or the character is a smart aleck, like Jerry Seinfeld, who looks at something and says, why is that? Why is that like that? Whereas a comedy combines premise, situation, character, and most important, theme, the meaning of something, which is why when you go to a comedy, you come out feeling refreshed and revivified, rejuvenated, because comedies touch something that's very central to us. It touches our sense of hope, our sense of heart, our sense of relationships. In the beginning of comedy, in the beginning of the comic hero's journey, you have a character who is missing something. They're less than. In the hero's journey, your character starts off as someone who has greatness within. Luke Skywalker has greatness within. He doesn't know it quite yet, but he'll find out that he has the force within him. In a comedy, our characters don't have greatness within. They are as far from greatness within as is humanly possible. They are misshapen. They are misbegotten. They are missing something. In Groundhog Day, Phil Connors, played by Bill Murray, is a jerk. He's a cynical jerk. In 40-Year-Old Virgin, Steve Carell is 40 years old, and he's given up trying to have a relationship. He's a 40-year-old virgin. That in and of itself is crazy. And so our characters go through this impossible or improbable situation, and they come out whole. So in a hero's journey, the hero faces a broken world, and he goes off on a journey, comes back, and he fixes the world. That would be great if we could do that. Most of us can't do that. In the comic hero's journey, our heroes are broken, and they go off and face a world, and they come back, and they have been made whole. They are made more capable of being in their own world.
Now, I think that
Go
the
ahead.
hero's journey teaches us about our own selves. And I think that the hero's journey is really our own journey of change. That the
Right.
hero's journey describes somebody who makes a commitment and a decision to change their life in some way, to become a new person.
How many of us do that?
I think that we do that a lot, but I also think that that what you're describing does that too. So there's
Here's my not that there's anything wrong with the hero's journey. Would that we would make a conscious decision to become better people or lose weight. What I love about the comic hero's journey is that all these journeys are inadvertent. They're accidental. They're forced upon these characters. They have no choice but to either adapt or perish.
And I've gone through moments in my life where I feel like I am literally stumbling down a corridor, tripping on my way through this stage in my life. And I think that's what you're describing just then.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's a universal thing. And I think it's actually a little bit more universal in practice than the hero's journey, which is aspirational. Would that we would do the right thing when we're forced, when we had the choice. Most of us don't.
But on both in your version of the comic hero's journey, you have the WTF moment,
right.
In the hero's journey, it's the call to adventure.
Right.
Which, and either way, it's something that unsettles a person, and in many cases, literally forces them to cross the threshold.
Right. Exactly.
But why now so you reframe it as the WTF moment. Is that different than a call to adventure?
Here's what I think the difference is, because when I'm writing about the comic hero's journey, I'm not saying the hero's journey doesn't work. I'm saying here are the sometimes subtle, sometimes obvious differences.
Clearly.
When you're doing comedy. To me, the WTF is something that is, as you say, that the characters stumble into. They never make a choice. In Star Wars, from the very beginning of the movie, he wants to be a pilot. He wants to join the rebellion, but he thinks he can't because he has to do the the water harvest.
He's going to help his aunt and uncle, yeah.
Right, he can't go away. And then the Empire comes in and they incinerate his aunt and uncle. So he's got no. So now I'm free to go join the rebellion. In the comic hero's journey, our characters don't want to be great. They are happy being in their truncated, limited lives. I mean, that's one of the big important differences. In the hero's journey, our characters are aware that there's something missing, and they're looking to go to something missing. They get the call to adventure, and then there's the refusal of the call, because you don't go right away. You don't just say, sure, right, I'm going to fight the rebellion. You wait a second. I don't know that I want to be God's prophet. Maybe I have to sit in a whale's belly for a couple of days just to think things out. In the comic hero's journey, our characters are happy being where they are. We in the audience can see, well, this guy, Phil Connors in Groundhog Day, he's a jerk. This guy, Steve Carell in 40-Year-Old Virgin, that's no way to live. We can see that our characters are in a place that's not right for them. But the characters themselves are happy. They think everything's fine. They think, don't rock the boat. I'm doing great. And then something, the WTF moment happens, and something pushes them off balance. They are forced to go into a new world. They are forced to cross the threshold. They have no choice in it. They have no say in it. In Tropic Thunder, our actors who are playing soldiers in a Vietnam War movie are taken into the jungle by a director who thinks, well, this will be a good idea. This will really get them in the mood to shoot this Vietnam War movie. And 2 minutes.
Wait a second. I just need to do a show ID, and then you'll tell us what Tropic Thunder is about.
Okay.
So when I do the radio show, I basically paste in some bumpers and things.
Okay.
Like that. I just need to pause for a couple moments so I can find it on the edit.
Okay.
My guest for this show is Steve Kaplan. He's the author of The Comic Hero's Journey, The Hidden Tools of Comedy and the Serious Business of Being Funny. He's co-founder of Manhattan Punchline Theater and creator of the HBO New Writers Project, and artists he's taught, directed, or produced have won Oscars, Emmys, and Golden Globes. So, Steve, you were going to tell us about Tropic Thunder.
Right. So in Tropic Thunder, our main character, Speed Tugman, played by Ben Stiller, is a self-deluded action star who really has no clue and is actually not that good an actor. And he and the other actors in the cast, including Robert Downey Jr. and Jay Baruchel, they're brought to the jungle. And within 2 minutes, the director, played by Steve Coogan, steps on a landmine and is blown up. So these actors did not choose to be in a jungle, being shot at by drug lords. They stumble into it. And if this was a drama, if this was an action movie, they would all act heroic. They would all go, boy, we need to really buckle up and fight these drug lords. But, these are just actors, and all they want to do in the beginning is just get back to home base and not be in any trouble. So that the WTF puts our characters in an uncomfortable situation that they never wanted to be in, but they have no choice. Dorothy gets taken to the world of Oz, whereas all she wanted to do was just keep her dog. I mean, that she didn't want to go on an adventure. She didn't want to fight a wicked witch. She just wanted to keep her dog. So our characters in the beginning have very short-sighted goals. And after they go through the WTF, their goals change, what we call the discovered goal.
Well, why do you call comic heroes heroes?
That's a good question. I think we call comic heroes heroes because they're the hero of their story. They are the ones who are, or the, I guess that you could call, maybe they're the anti-heroes or the non-heroes. They're the ones who have to undergo this transformation.
All right, let me try it. Let me take a shot at why they're the heroes.
Okay.
I mean, and I'm kind of jumping ahead, but what you describe in your book is that the comic hero kind of wakes up and learns a little bit about themselves, and they've had a mask, which you'll talk about, that shows a different persona, and in the end, they become a better person.
Right, a more fully actualized person.
And I think that that's the story of the hero's journey that Campbell talks about too. It's the person who, in the hero's journey, the person goes through a series of trials and events and battles and what have you, and ends up going back home and saving the world.
Right.
And I think the difference that you're describing is that the comic hero saves himself.
Exactly. The heroes in the hero's journey is already someone who has many skills, and along the way he picks up even more skills and magic, potions and rings and swords, and he comes home with the elixir, something to heal the rest of us, because he's already cool. But in the comic hero's journey, the hero transforms and heals himself.
So let's take a step back and walk us through the hero's journey and then the comics journey, and to give us a quick overview of the difference between them. You started to do that.
Okay. Well, in the hero's journey, the hero is usually some extraordinary person. They either know it, like Jason of the Argonauts, or they don't know, they're unaware of it, like Luke Skywalker.
And often an orphan. I know Michael Haig describes that as his typical hero, starting out as an orphan.
That's, yeah. I guess that's true. There's connections, but the connections are tenuous.
They've lost the connection to who they really are.
I would agree with that. There's a call to an adventure. At first, many of them refuse the call. Then they go on the adventure. They cross the first threshold. There's a time when they meet the threshold guardian. They go into the inner cave. They fight the big bad, whatever the big bad is. There's usually a resurrection, meaning that there's a death. Sometimes it's the actual death of the character, Gandalf in Lord of the Rings, and then there's a resurrection, whether it's a metaphorical resurrection, like in Star Wars, where they're in the trash compactor and they're almost going to die, but then they don't. And then there's a return home, and then return with the elixir. In the comic hero's journey, it goes through some of those similar steps, but again, I think what's different is that the character in the comic hero's journey is thrust into this new world unexpectedly, inadvertently, accidentally, and through no volition of their own. They're at first, once the comic hero is thrust into the new world, their first reaction is to desperately try to return to the old world.
And, yeah, well, I just want to add one thing that I kind of got from the book and from your YouTube videos, is that in the ordinary world, the comic hero is like disconnected, ignorant of who he is or she is, and really only a partial person in some ways.
Yeah, there's a hole inside them. There's something that needs to be filled. In practical terms, what this means for people who are writing comedies is you want to make sure that your character doesn't, starts off the story with 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 absent or damaged relationships. Don't start off your character with a happy husband or a loving wife. Don't start them off with the great job. You want to start them off in some way where they don't have what they need, but they don't know it. You want to start them off not knowing who they are. We talk about the mask and the mensch. In the beginning of the comic hero's journey, the character's wearing a mask, both to himself and to other people. They don't know who they really are. We get a glimpse of who they are in the beginning of a movie or a screenplay, but only a glimpse. And as they go through the transformation, they become more of the person who they are. Our comic hero is broken, only they don't know it. They're unaware. If they knew it, it would be a drama. It would be a tragedy. If you have a character that starts your story off going, I'm so unhappy, things aren't working out. Well, why don't they do something to change it? That's a drama. That could be a dramatic story. In our stories, our characters don't know that they're not who they are. They're not doing what they need to do.
So they start off going la-di-da-di-da, la-di-da-di-da.
Yeah, exactly. If you look at the beginning of 40-Year-Old Virgin, what does he do? He wakes up. He makes himself the world's greatest single omelet. He bikes to work. He has no clue that this is not the way to live a life. He plays Halo by himself. He practices his trombone. He paints little figurines. He paints their silver pants blue. I mean, this is no way to live a life. And as he goes through the story, all through the story, he tells people, I didn't ask for this. And characters tell him back, you asked for all of it. And that's the comic hero. That's who we are. We don't know what we want. We don't know who we are. And we're thrust into the world. We were happy as clams before. We're thrust into the world. And we keep on being thrust into new worlds and not knowing who we are, where we need to go, what we need to do. And we either transform or we don't. And comedy stories are stories of transformation. And so every transformation is magical. Every transformation has magical powers. That's why so many comedies seem like they're fantasies or seem steeped in some kind of magical world. Because the fact that we can go from being jerks and assholes into better people, that's almost magical. I mean, psychiatrists will tell you that if you marry a jerk, 30 years later, you have an older, fatter, balder jerk. But in romantic comedies, for instance, love is a magical power that transforms jerks into nice guys. So part of the comic hero's journey is the understanding that our characters have discovered goals. They discover who they really are and what they really want. That the goal that a hero has in the beginning of a movie, in an action movie, is the same goal as they have at the end. Get the bad guy, save the family, kill the villain. But in a comedy, our characters all have the wrong goals at the beginning. And as we go through the transformation, we find what we call the discovered goal and inner goals. And that the comic hero is somebody who is also creating families around them. You can have a drama in which a solo man goes out into a dark world and brings back the elixir, and while they might have allies, they can stay alone. But in comedies, characters don't stay alone. The comedy characters start alone. They start with either flawed or damaged or absent relationships. But along the way, in every comedy, our characters are are gaining allies, forming relationships, and learning the value of relationships, so that in Tropic Thunder, for instance, in the beginning of the movie, Ben Stiller and Robert Downey Jr. are hardly talking to each other. They're both incredibly egotistic actors who are fighting for screen time and upstaging each other. But by the end, they're helping each other. They're working each other. They're sacrificing for each other. So yes, at the end of a comic story, there are a lot of similarities between a drama and a comedy, because by the end of the comic story, the comic characters are capable of heroic, selfless actions, but not totally heroic and selfless, because even at the end of Groundhog Day, in which Bill Murray has transformed into the perfect guy. He spends the whole day helping people, right? He fixes the tires up for an old lady's car. He gives a guy a Heimlich maneuver. He lights a lady's cigarette. He plays piano at the Groundhog Day dance. But the first thing he does on that day is he catches a kid from a tree. This kid falls out of a tree every day, and Bill Murray is there, and he catches him. And if you were a wonderful person, what would you say to the kid? Wouldn't you say to the kid, hey, be careful. Be careful next time, because you could get hurt. But what does Bill Murray say? He says, have you thanked me? Have you ever thanked me? I'll be here again maybe tomorrow, brat. Because even though he's transformed, he's still human. Our characters in comedies maintain and retain their humanity. Meaning,
okay, I want to focus on one piece you talked about, because remember, I call this the bottom-up show.
Right.
And what you just described, that the ultimate process in a comedy is for the comedic hero to build relationships and family and community.
Right.
That doesn't get any more bottom-up than that.
Exactly.
And so, and you say that is in every comedy. You just said it. Yes, I agree with that. In every comedy, your characters form families. In fact, every sitcom is about characters creating a family, forming a family around themselves. That whether it's a family sitcom or a workplace sitcom like Murphy Brown, or any kind of sitcom, Friends, Seinfeld, they form families around themselves. Now, you talk about how character is an essential part of comedy too.
Well, there's characters in drama, but what the important thing is, in comedy, character determines events, as opposed to a thriller or an action film in which characters respond to events and plot points.
Okay. And go ahead.
So in a well-made comedy, what happens after the WTF? The WTF is the one time in a comic movie that you can lie, that you can just make something up and something impossible or improbable. But
give me an example of that.
Something impossible or improbable, or something, or how characters respond to it.
Well, you said you can lie. I mean, or
right.
you're talking about a premise like Bill Murray living his life.
Right. So if you look at Groundhog Day, could a guy live the same day over and over again? No. That it's impossible. That can't happen. But if it did happen, what would happen then? And the important thing about Groundhog Day is that there are no other lies in Groundhog Day. Everything that happens in that movie develops out of that one premise. Now, there are movies that have multiple premises and they don't work as well. One example is the animated movie Chicken Little. Chicken Little is about an anthropomorphic chicken who embarrasses himself and his father by telling the whole town the sky is falling, and thereby humiliating himself at a time of life when you'd rather die than be humiliated, which is middle school. So that's enough for a movie. He goes to middle school. He gets beat up in dodgeball games. He's got a girlfriend, ugly duckling. He's got a best friend, big fat pig. That's enough. That would be enough for a movie. But Disney also put in an alien invasion in the middle of the movie. So those are two completely different premises. So you want to avoid having two WTFs in your narrative.
Can you give a couple more examples of Big Lie, WTFs, in other successful comedies? I mean, I think you mentioned Big in your book. And
there's in Big, you have a kid waking up, he's a 30-year-old man. That could never happen. That's a big lie. A guy wakes up the same day over and over again. That's a big lie. In 40-Year-Old Virgin, it's not impossible, but it's improbable. It's improbable that a guy, who hasn't taken a vow of celibacy, is just kind of bumbling along at 40 years old, who doesn't have some kind of medical condition, and is a virgin. Is it impossible? No, but it's improbable. In Tropic Thunder, a group of actors are brought out to the jungle to get into the character for their Vietnam War movie, and their director blows himself up on a landmine in 2 minutes. Is it impossible? No, but it's improbable.
What's your favorite comedy?
I would have to say, well, that's like saying which is my favorite child. The fact that I don't have any children makes that kind of academic question, but still, I would have to say that for a long time it's been Groundhog Day.
I was going to guess that. Yeah.
Simply because to me, it's a great combination of character, premise, and theme. It's a movie that makes you think, what would I do if I had eternity to live? It's a movie that makes you laugh. It's a movie that makes you care. And it's a movie that's actually very different from what it planned to be. In the beginning, it was just supposed to be some light summer movie starring Bill Murray that would appeal to everybody who liked him in Caddyshack and Meatballs. And what it turned out to be was something that was telling a very important and spiritual story. There's a moment in Groundhog Day where it's the third day that it's happened, and he's thinking this is really happening. And in the script, he shaves his head just to prove that it's not happening. He shaves his head into a mohawk. He trashes his room. He splashes paint all over the room. And he wakes up the next day and the room is exactly the way it was. And they shot that. And when they looked at the rushes, they said to themselves, Harold Ramis, who's the director and the co-writer, and his producer said to himself, why would this guy, Phil Connors, why would he shave his hair into a mohawk? Why would he do that? And so they reshot at great expense. They reshot the scene, and all that happens in the scene is he takes a pencil and he breaks it in half, and he puts one half on the floor and the other half on the night table. He wakes up and the pencil is whole, and then he knows it's happening. And from that point on, everything that happens in the movie happens not because they say, wouldn't it be funny if, but because they ask themselves, what would happen? What would you really do? There's a part of Groundhog Day, once he's kind of gotten his girl, Andy McDowell, to understand that it's really happening, and he's transforming, he's becoming a better person. He's learning how to play piano. And he passes this old guy that he passed every day. And the guy's in an alley dying. And he decides, I'm going to help this guy. And so he brings the guy to a hospital, and the nurse says, the guy dies. He says, what do you mean? She says, it was just his time. And he says, not today. So the next day he sees the guy, he brings him to a coffee shop and he feeds him food. And another day he's there giving artificial respiration to the guy. And he keeps on trying to save the guy, and the guy keeps on dying. And eventually he just looks up to the heavens, kind of acknowledging, I'm going through this thing. It's almost like I am a god, but I'm not God. And the studio desperately wanted them to cut that section out because it wasn't fun. It wasn't up. It wasn't silly. It wasn't, what has this got to do with this funny summer movie? And they refused to cut it because it's the whole meaning of the movie. The whole meaning of the movie is how can you be a man in the world? Not how can you be a god if you have ultimate power, if you live the same, if nothing can ever kill you. How can you be a man in the world? And the old man sequence in Groundhog Day typify that. So to me, it's a movie that has great meaning. In fact, Danny Rubin has said, who's the co-writer of the movie, has said that he's been getting letters ever since it's come out for 20 years from Catholic groups saying it's the best Catholic movie ever, from Buddhist groups saying it's the best Buddhist movie ever. And Danny Rubin's a Buddhist. From Jewish groups saying it's the best Jewish movie ever, because it's about what is a man's responsibility to other people.
It is a wonderful movie. We need to take another show ID, and then I'm going to talk to you about Archetypes.
Okay.
So we'll pause.
Okay. I'll have some coffee.
My guest for this show is Steve Kaplan. He's the author of The Comic Hero's Journey, The Hidden Tools of Comedy, and The Serious Business of Being Funny. He's co-founder of Manhattan Punchline Theater and creator of the HBO New Writers Project, and his website is kaplancomedy.com. So talk a little bit about the different archetypes that are involved in the comic hero's journey.
Joseph Campbell wrote about archetypes, and that comes from Carl Jung's work, that in our subconscious are all these archetypes that are fragments of who we are if we're a whole actualized person. And the reason I became interested in archetypes is because of the work of the Commedia dell'arte. In the Renaissance, the Commedia dell'arte was a group of actors, and there would be 8 actors in a troupe or 12 actors in a troupe, and each actor would portray a specific character, and they would only portray that character for their entire career. And what was interesting about the Commedia dell'arte was that these were actors who had evolved, or the art form had evolved before there was literacy. So there was no playwrights, there were no theaters, there were only actors playing characters, specific characters, and they would improvise their entire performance. They would know when they came in and when they came out, but that's all they knew. And those actors played these specific characters. They were the characters of the servants, or called the zanies. They're like Arlecchino, like Charlie Chaplin, the man-child who was very driven by primal urges like sex or food. The Brighella, his older, more violent brother. Scapino, the more sexualized servant. There was Pantalone, the lecherous old man like Archie Bunker, or miserly old man. Think Archie Bunker or Scrooge McDuck. Marionetta, the battle axe wife. The Inamorata, the young lovers. And what happened is that these characters determine plot. So that let's imagine you have a park bench, and on the park bench are the 2 young lovers, Leandro and Isabella, and their physical movement is what they would because they're young and they're both good looking and they're not that bright, they would go to kiss. So let's take away the young man and let's put in the Pantalone, the lecherous old man. Now what's the movement? They're on a park bench. What does the lecherous old man want to do with the beautiful young girl? What do you think? Take a guess.
I don't want to. All I can think of is Harvey Weinstein.
Okay. So what does Harvey Weinstein do? He lunges for her, right?
Okay.
What does the young girl do?
She slaps him in the face.
Well, don't give her that many skills. He lunges at her. What does she do?
Oh God, I don't know.
maybe runs away from him.
Okay.
He's chasing her around the bench, right?
Oh, okay.
The young girl. Let's put in Marionetta, the battle axe wife. Now what's the movement?
Replacing the young girl with Marionetta?
With Marionetta, the battle axe wife.
She.
Now the battle axe wife, and now she's chasing the old man around the bench. Let's take them both away. Let's put in three zanies, a Arlecchino or Brighella and a Pedrolino. Now they're all different, so they're all going to go in different directions, but because they're idiots, they're going to knock heads and knock each other out. So what the Commedia teaches us is that rather than playwrights or directors, character creates action, character creates plot, and character creates movement. So from this idea that you can power story by following and trusting character, you come up with useful archetypes for your comic hero's journey. There's the archetype of the fool, the one who knows nothing, like Joey in Friends. So there's the archetype of the know-it-all, the one who knows everything but usually has no common sense, like Jay Baruchel in Tropic Thunder. There's the archetype of the object of desire. That could be a man or a woman, but usually the object of desire is an innocent who compels other people to transform in order to get their love. You have the innocent, somebody who's usually new to a situation. The innocent is a very useful character because you have to explain things to the innocent. You have to train and teach the innocent and thereby explain and teach the audience. But the most important character in a comedy is the trickster. The trickster is the character who colors outside the box, who breaks the rules, who doesn't even recognize that there are rules and doesn't even see that there's a box. And so in every comic story, you have a trickster. The trickster doesn't have to be the main character, but in every comic story, you need a trickster, somebody who is going to shortcut the convention, upend the convention and shortcut the rules and make their own rules.
Now, usually there's a mentor too. Could the trickster be the mentor or the
mentor is another? The mentor is usually another character. The mentor is usually somebody who is the mentor could be the voice of reason. One of your characters is the voice of reason. The voice of reason is somebody who knows some information, but in comedies, the voice of reason has their own problems, and they're either crazy or cantankerous, or they have their own specific problems.
Who would be an example? Some examples of voice of reason and tricksters.
A trickster is Bill Murray in Groundhog Day, where he figures out how to pick up girls because he goes and asks a girl in a coffee shop 3 questions. Where'd you go to school? Who was your English teacher? And who did you go to prom with? And then he comes back the next day and he goes, Aunt Nancy from Miss Taylor's English class, and he picks up girls that way. So he's the trickster. He romances Andie MacDowell by figuring out what she likes, and he comes back day after day after day, improving his pitch to her, because if he struck out the day before by saying, let's have a toast, and she says, what do we toast? He says, I always toast to the groundhog. And she says, kind of disapprovingly, I like to toast to world peace. So then cut to the next day, he says, let's have a toast. And she says, what do you like to toast to? And he says, I like to say a prayer and pray for world peace. And he says the silent prayer, and then he says, Amen. And so she's taken with him. So he's the trickster. In Big, the trickster isn't Tom Hanks, who's the innocent. The trickster is his best friend. I think the guy's name is Billy, who's 12 years old, and Billy steals money from his parents so that Tom Hanks can go to a flop house and wait out the month while they're waiting for word on where the magic fortune-telling machine is. So you have tricksters in movies. Let me see, in 40-Year-Old Virgin, the trickster is Romany Malco, who convinces Steve Carell to pick up girls who are drunk, and then he tells Steve Carell to pretend to be somebody at the Datapalooza, the speed dating. So you have different characters who are tricksters, and you also have characters who are animals. And your animal is a character who's usually more primal and more physical than other characters. And Melissa McCarthy is a great example of an animal character. In Bridesmaids, Melissa McCarthy, when they have food poisoning, she goes and she poops in a sink. She gets everybody else out of the bathroom, and she doesn't care. She poops in a sink. She goes, and when Kristen Wiig is all depressed and has given up, she goes and she literally beats Kristen Wiig up to get her to fight back, to get her out of her depression. So those are the kind of archetypes that you have in comedies. Animals, voices of reason, innocents, fools, tricksters.
Okay. So we've got maybe 4 minutes left. What is the value of comedy to society, to individuals?
I think we need to learn to laugh at ourselves. We are a very ridiculous kind of animal, don't you think? We like to think of ourselves as the master of all we survey, but the reality is that we're just pretending. We're afraid that people will find out who we really are. We're afraid that people will find out that we don't know as much as we like to think we do. We're afraid that we're not going to get what we want. And the comedian is the courageous person who gets up in front of a large group of strangers and simply confesses to being human, confesses to being somebody who is imperfect and is okay with that. The great comic gesture is the shrug. You're okay. We're okay. If you haven't died yet, you're okay. Comedy helps us live with who we are. Drama helps us dream about what we can be, but comedy helps us live with who we are. Comedy helps us live with the blows and the sufferings and the losses and the setbacks. And the comedian says, it's okay. You'll live. It's not that bad. And if you don't live, then you don't have anything to worry about. So it's not that bad either.
So who are some of your comedy writer heroes? Who are the best comedy writers ever? Well,
I used to answer that question by saying Woody Allen, but then I came to realize that he's kind of a creepy guy. But if you can kind of separate the guy who marries his girlfriend's daughter from the guy who did Annie Hall and Sleeper, but we should have known something when we saw Manhattan. That should have been a tip to those of us who were paying attention. I would say in political comedy, Jon Stewart for over a decade was my go-to guy to laugh about what was happening in the world. In terms of movies, Judd Apatow and the people that he surrounded himself with, and I'm very fickle, or I'm a comedy slut. I like too much comedy. I'm taken with too many great comic stories. For me, lately, I love The Marvelous Miss Maisel. I think Amy Sherman Palladino is great. I love Jim Carrey's Kidding. David Crane's Episodes was one of my favorite sitcoms. I think that there's been a dearth of great comedy in movies, only because movies have become something for the lowest common denominator. It's either superhero films or horror films, but a great movie from the past couple of years was The Grand Budapest Hotel, which I thought was lovely and funny and sweet. But
we ran out of time. We gotta
make me laugh. Make me laugh. That's all I can say. Just
all right.
Make me laugh. I'm going to laugh at it.
And my guest for this show has been Steve Kaplan. He's the author of The Comic Hero's Journey, Hidden Tools of Comedy and Serious Business of Being Funny. His website is kaplancomedy.com. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks for having me. It's been really enjoyable.